Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's CSW side event on Measuring What Matters, 10 Years of the Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index. Why has it mattered and what's next? My name is Jemima Njuki, and I serve as the Chief for Women's Economic Empowerment at UN Women. And I'm thrilled to be here today to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index, or the WEAI, right here at CSW, where it all started. The WEAI was launched 10 years ago in 2012 at the 56th UN Commission on the Status of Women. And 10 years since its launch, diverse partners, including governments, have taken the lead in collecting data on women's empowerment using WEAI-based metrics. In fact, to date, over 230 organizations have used it across 58 countries to track progress toward women's empowerment and gender equality in agriculture. Today, we will hear from governments and partners that have been critical to WEAI's success, and we will discuss country experiences in using the WEAI. We will reflect on its impact on measuring and tracking gender equity and equality, and further hone our vision for the next 10 years. We are very grateful to our hosts, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, USAID, IFAD, IFPRI, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for organizing this important event. Let me first cover some logistical information. We will have a Q&A session at the end of this webinar, so please enter questions directly in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen for this Q&A segment. Feel free to introduce yourself. I have seen some people have already started doing so in the chat, so please continue to introduce yourselves and engage with other attendees. While today's session will be conducted in English, please note that the interpretation options in French and Spanish at the bottom of the screen. Now, I would like to start with a short video featuring voices of rural women from two grassroots organizations in Kenya and India. The first is Dorcas Njuki, who we share a name with, and Alice Isoye from Roots, Kenya, a national movement of grassroots women-led community-based groups to strengthen the capacity of women as change agents. Then we will hear from Mena Ben Koka and Sima Ben Padia from the Self-Employed Women's Association, or SEWA, in India. SEWA is a trade union of over 2 million members organizing for collective well-being and shared sustainable wealth. Both Roots and SEWA work to empower their members and are using WEAI to examine the links between women's empowerment and adoption of climate-smart agricultural practices.
I'm Dorcas Kigera, a Roots champion in Nakuru County. I think women empowerment is good because it enhances overall development in the society and also raises leaders who are able to articulate women issues. I can say, for example, I'm an empowered woman. Before, I was not able to stand before people and speak, but now I'm able to stand even in committee. I'm one of the board members of the board of management in one of the schools where my children go to school. I'm able to stand before stakeholders. I'm able to lobby for my issues. I'm able to do advocacy and speak to my stakeholders without shame, with a lot of confidence. And I'm able to own a land through the empowerment that we have been given by Roots Kenya. What has contributed to the empowerment is the skills that we have got to do advocacy. We have done advocacy. Right now we have got good roads. We have access water. We have got water even in our compounds. But we have got also challenges. of which we have not been able to deal with them completely. Some of the cultures does not believe in women leading, women owning land, women owning property. We are engaging ourselves in public participation to air out our issues as women and even as the entire community. Thank you.
Women empowerment is important because it brings them out from that level up to the upper level where they can make a decision making that is affecting other women. I feel I'm empowered because I'm able to do my own things, decide what to do, what is right and what is wrong. I'm able to have knowledge or skills on how we can make a green garden, kitchen garden, and here I'm able to sustain my family. I'm resilient in everything in this compound because I have vegetables of all types.
નમસ્તે, મારું નામ ખોખર મીના છે. કચ્છ જિલ્લાથી માતાપટ ગામથી હું આવું છું અને છેલ્લા 3 વર્ષથી હું એક સેવાની સભ્ય બેન છું અને સેવા બજારની હું શેર હોલ્ડર બેન છું. જેમ આપણે કહીએ છીએ કે હું જ મારા કંપનીની માલિક અને મેનેજર છું. તો એ કેવી રીતે? કેમ કે અમે સંગઠિત થયા છીએ, અમારામાં સશક્તિકરણ થયું છે. અમે પહેલાં બોલી નહોતા શકતા, અમારું શિક્ષણ પણ અટકાવતું, જેમ કે 1 થી 8 ધોરણ જ અમે ભણતા. પણ જ્યારે અમે સંગઠિત થયા ત્યારે અમારું પૂરતું ભણતર અમને આપવામાં આવ્યું. પછી અમે બહાર જતા થયા. હવે અમને તમે 100 માણસોની વચ્ચે બોલવાનું કહો તો અમે બોલી શકીએ છીએ. કેમ કે અમે સંગઠિત છીએ, સેવામાં આવ્યા, સેવામાં ઘણી બધી તાલીમો લીધી જેથી અમે બોલી શક્યા છીએ.
અને સંગઠિત થઈ તો મારામાં સશક્તિકરણ થયું અને મારા જીવનના પડકારો સામે લડવામાં મદદ મળી. હું મારા જીવનના પડકારો સામે લડી શકી અને મારા જેવા અન્ય બહેનોના જીવનના પડકારો સામે લડવામાં તેમને મદદરૂપ થઈ. સેવામાંથી મને ઘણી બધી તાલીમો મળી છે. સેવામાંથી મને ખેતીની આધુનિકીકરણની પણ તાલીમ મળી છે અને એ તાલીમો હું બહેનો સુધી લઈ જઈ શકું છું અને તેમને નવી નવી ખેતી કરતાં પણ શીખવાડું છું. બહેનો પણ ખેતીમાં આધુનિકીકરણ લાવી શકે છે. જ્યારે હું ગરીબ બહેનો સાથે કામ કરવા જાઉં છું તો તેમની શું તકલીફો છે તેની મને ખબર પડે છે અને બહેનોને સરકારી યોજનાઓની કશી ખબર હોતી નથી. એટલે એ બહેનોને હું સરકારી યોજનાઓ વિશે સમજાવું છું અને તેમને એમાં જોડવાનો પણ પ્રયાસ કરું છું. અમારા આણંદ જિલ્લામાં જ્યારે ઈ શ્રમ કાર્ડનો પ્રોગ્રામ યોજના આવી ત્યારે અમે તે બહેનોને અને ખેડૂતો ભાઈઓને તેમાં 90,000 કાર્ડ ઈ શ્રમના કાઢી આપી અને તેનો લાભ અપાવ્યો છે. જો હું આ સેવામાં સંગઠિત ના થઈ હોત અને હું મારા જીવનના પડકારો સામે ના લડી શકી હોત તો હું મારા જેવા અન્ય બહેનોને પણ તેમના પડકારો સામે લડવામાં મદદરૂપ ના થઈ શકી હોત. મને સેવામાં ઘણી બધી એવી નવી માહિતી પણ મળી છે. એટલે મારામાં એવો સરસ કોન્ફિડન્સ પણ આવ્યો છે.
Thank you so much for those videos. What powerful voices. They remind us of why empowerment matters for rural women. But really to hear what empowerment means for them in their own words, leadership, access, ownership of land, their resilience, being able to articulate their aspirations. Just amazing, just powerful. We will now turn to an important partner in our journey for collecting gender and empowerment data, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO. And we have the pleasure of welcoming Maximo Terrero, the Chief Economist for FAO, who will share his reflections on how FAO understands the importance of collecting gender and empowerment data in rural and agricultural service. Maximo, thank you so much for joining us. Good to see you. And we are eager to hear from you.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And as you all know, the continuity scarcity of sex disaggregated data and gender statistics hinders a comprehensive understanding of rural women and men's roles too, status and contributions in the agri-food systems. It also prevents an understanding of the gender distribution of benefits from participating in the agri-food systems, and thus it hinders the design of gender-responsive and transformative policies to achieve sustainable development, including gender equality, women's empowerment for SDG 5, and inclusive rural transformation. FAO is clearly committed to enhance the collection of gender data and statistics in agriculture and food systems. We support countries to address the data gap by raising awareness about the needs of gender data, advising on gender responsive and transformative policies, supporting the implementation of rigorous gender analysis, and providing trainings, guidelines, and good practices for the collection and use of gender statistics and sex disaggregated data. The 2030 Agenda commitment to leave no one behind provides an imperative to address gender inequality as a cross-cutting theme for development and resilience building, and to increasing the availability of gender statistics. A decade ago, FAO recognized the need to have a measure of women empowerment in the agricultural and hosted with USAID and IFPRI the launch of the Women Empowerment Agricultural Index, the WEAI, which today we are in the 10th year anniversary. During the 56th section of the UN Commission on the Status of Women to an audience of nearly 500 delegates. Since then, FAO has applied the WEAI modules in various projects and surveys, such as Nepal, Senegal, Tajikistan, to assess the linkages between climate change, rural outmigration, and women's work and empowerment in agriculture. In addition, in collaboration with IFPRI and IFAD, FAO has piloted a project-level adaptation of the WEAI, Pro-WEAI survey tool developed in the Gender, Agricultural, and Asset Project, Phase 2, the GAAP2, in the context of the impact evaluation of the United Nations Young Program on rural women's economic empowerment in Nigeria and Ethiopia. Now, 10 years later, FAO recognizes the need to push our work on the WEAI in coordination with our partners in two ways. First, to think through how the WEAI could go beyond agricultural and consider empowerment in the broader agri-food systems. The Pro-WEAI for market inclusion is one example of work in that direction. Second, to connect the WEAI to measure of economic empowerment by following Nelia Kaber's definition, which goes beyond agency and defines empowerment as the process by which people expand their ability to make strategic life choices. This definition encompasses three dimensions: resources, economic, human, and social preconditions; agency, power-related processes; and achievements, which is the well-being outcome. This is why, for example, FAO has always included the food insecurity experience scale module into the WEAI module in order to assess the linkages between empowerment and food security. In this light, and building on the WEAI experience, methodological work is underway to develop a new metric called the Women's Empowerment Metric for National Statistical Systems, the WEMINS. Like the WEAI, the WEMINS will focus on agency, defined as women's and men's capacity to define their own goals and make strategic choices in pursuit of these goals. Recognizing the increasing livelihood diversification in the developing economies, WEMINS will be applicable to both agricultural and non-agricultural livelihoods. Further, it will address the same aspects of gender equality considered by the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 5, and will be based on a light questionnaire to be potentially appended to existing national survey programs. These choices will increase the chances of adoption of the WEMINS worldwide. WEMINS is being developed by IFPRI and Emory University in close collaboration with the 50 by 2030 initiative to close the agricultural data gap, of which FAO is an implementing agency, together with the World Bank and IFAD. In particular, the 50 by 2030 initiative is contributing the questionnaire development through methodological work and pilot studies. Once the metrics are finalized, the WEMINS questionnaire will be proposed to the 50 by 2030 partner countries as one of the rotating thematic questionnaires to be added to the main agricultural survey questionnaires. Appending the WEMINS questionnaire to the core 50 by 2030 questionnaires will offer a unique opportunity to analyze the relationship between women empowerment and their achievements in agriculture, adding value to the 50 by 2030 surveys. FAO congratulates all those who have developed to make the WEAI a success over the past 10 years and looks forward to continue working with partners to adapt, expand it, and because they have to respond to the rapidly changing needs of women and men working in the agri-food systems. And we will put a lot of emphasis in keep improving and bringing indicators that will complement the WEAI to assure that it's not just a measure of empowerment, but it's also a measurement of empowerment that is together with significant improvement in access to labor force, to the labor demand, to respond to the labor demand, in better wages under similar conditions, and to avoid segmentation of markets. We believe this is the way to be able to have good information to bring the correct policies to achieve the impacts that are needed today, so that we can bring into our economic value that enormous value that women have in the market and which today we are not taking advantage of. Thank you very much, Amin.
Thank you very much, Maximo. Your remarks shed light on how FAO, including through the 50 by 2030 initiative, is playing such an important role here alongside governments, and we look forward to your continued commitment in advancing, especially women's, and making sure that, you know, if we don't want to leave anyone behind, as you mentioned, that gender data, gender statistics are going to be really, really important. Thank you so much. I know some of you might be asking, what is this WEAI? I am hoping now many of you. But let's now dive a bit deeper into this innovative tool that is used to track gender equality and measure empowerment, agency, and women's inclusion in the agriculture sector. It has evolved over the past decade to get into this exciting place where we are today. And Agnes Kisumbing will take us on that journey of WEAI's development and share her reflections 10 years on. Agnes Kisumbing is a senior research fellow at the International Food Policy Research Institute, IFPRI, in Washington, DC, where she leads the gender cross-cutting research theme. She's a co-developer of the Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index and the project level Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index, and a good friend of mine. Over to you, Agnes.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Jemima. 10 years ago, I was really privileged to be part of the WEAI launch at the 56th Commission on the Status of Women. And seated beside Her Excellency, Dr. Chowdhury, the Speaker of Parliament of the People's Republic of Bangladesh. It's good to be together again. It's like a reunion, even if only virtually. Next slide, please. To give everybody a brief background on what the WEAI is, let's look back to the beginning. It was developed by IFPRI, OFI, and USAID in 2012 to measure women's inclusion in the agricultural sector. It was quite different from other indices because it interviewed both men and women in the same household. It was designed to look at sole or joint decision-making and control over livelihoods, resources, and income, mostly in agriculture, and was initially used in population-based surveys. It drew heavily on Naila Kabir's definition of empowerment as expanding people's ability to make strategic life choices, especially when they hadn't been able to in the past. And in Naila Kabir's definition, the ability to exercise choice has 3 dimensions: resources, agency, and achievements, or well-being outcomes. But because we have better measures of resources and achievements already, the WEAI focused on the agency aspect, the ability to make choices, important choices, and to act on them. Next slide, please. The WEAI is made up of 2 indices, the 5 domains of empowerment and the gender parity index. And the 5 domains, which many of you are very familiar with, are production, resources, income, leadership in the community, and time, while the gender parity index, or GPI, examines a woman's empowerment relative to the man in the same household. So the WEAI is a measure of both empowerment and gender equality. If you implement it correctly, all WEAI-based measures allow us to measure the empowerment of women and men, regardless of the WEAI version. Next slide, please. WEAI has grown a lot since 2012. This slide shows the WEAI family tree from WEAI to the abbreviated WEAI to the project level WEAI and its variants. The original WEAI was rolled out to 19 Feed the Future countries, but users wanted a shorter version. So we delivered the abbreviated WEAI, or WEAI, keeping the same 5 domains, but going from 10 to 6 indicators. As more people started using the WEAI, agricultural development projects wanted a version that could measure their project's impact on women's empowerment. So with support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, USAID, and the CGI research programs on agriculture for nutrition and health, and policies, institutions, and markets, we worked together with 13 agricultural development projects to develop a project-level WEAI, or ProWEAI. I'm happy to note that the UN Systems Joint Program on Rural Women's Economic Empowerment was one of the originals that piloted the ProWEAI. We use qualitative methods to help us define and triangulate the indicators for ProWEAI. We also developed a version to track market inclusion across the different nodes of the value chain, the ProWEAI for market inclusion. There is also the IWEA, which integrates WEA into existing questionnaires, which was piloted by IFAD and shortened interview time considerably. And as Maximo Torero mentioned, we're also taking the lessons learned from WEA to develop a women's empowerment metric for national statistical systems, or women's. I'll talk about that in greater detail later. Next slide, please. It's been quite amazing to see WEA spread from Bangladesh, Guatemala, and Uganda, where the instrument was first piloted in 2011. Next slide, please. So in 2012, the official launch, we launched the WEA, and the US Feed the Future initiative included it in its baseline population-based surveys. Bangladesh was the first country to field it in a nationally representative survey, and later on, you'll hear how important this information was. Fielding this across so many countries gave us a first picture of the extent of women's disempowerment across countries using a common measure. Although it's a quantitative measure, qualitative work that involved listening to women's voices was part of the development of all WEA metrics. We got to hear what empowerment meant to women themselves, just as you have in these very inspiring videos. Next slide, please. Let's fast forward to 2022. WEA or its variants have now been used in 58 countries by 232 organizations. Happy 10th birthday to the WEA. Next slide, please. As we celebrate this milestone, we also note that the world is changing for us all and for women and girls. All of us face the consequences of climate change. And for women and girls in particular, the future brings increased market orientation, a greater importance of rural non-farm enterprises, as you saw in the video from Sewa, an increase in non-agricultural employment, increased migration and urbanization. And so we ask, are the original domains over which we're measuring empowerment still relevant? Next slide, please. Okay, so many developed agencies are designing and implementing value chain interventions that aim to reach, benefit, and empower women throughout the food system. To track the success of the interventions, we need tools to identify constraints that women and men face and to track empowerment across multiple nodes of the value chain and throughout food systems. The ProWEA for market inclusion includes a core ProWEA module plus new complementary indicators to investigate barriers to market access and inclusion for different value chain actors. And this dashboard of market inclusion indicators was validated using cognitive interviewing and qualitative work. The optional indicators include access to reliable sanitation and sexual hostility in the work environment to assess the environment in which women work. These additions enhance ProWEA's ability to measure and contextualize empowerment and inclusion across value chains. Next slide, please. For example, two indicators look at entrepreneurial mindset and input on decisions in the main value chain. Women have now realized that business is a way of life. If you look at a woman, you're looking at the whole nation, says a woman from Malawi. I'm capable of doing it myself so far. I do everything on my own will. There's no one to stop me or to hold me back from what I'm doing, says a woman from Bangladesh. These voices are very important so we understand what empowerment in these different nodes of the value chain mean to women themselves. Next slide, please. So lessons learned from WEA are informing our work with the 50 by 2030 initiative, the World Bank LSMS, and Emory University to develop a leaner instrument for use in nationally representative surveys. This will enable us to link women's empowerment to different types of data and offers the ability to answer questions on a nationally representative scale. The candidate questions we developed covered SDG 5, women's empowerment and gender equality, and other relevant SDGs. This is work in progress. We've completed stakeholder consultations. We piloted the first round of phone surveys and now are in the field or on the phone with the second round. We plan to field face-to-face surveys this year and launch a new tool next year in 2023. Women's will build on lessons from WEA, but will most likely look quite different. So as we continue to measure women's empowerment and gender equality, we hope that the data will continue to inform programs and policy so they not only reach and benefit women, but also empower them and enable us all to transform gender norms. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Agnes, for sharing this rich history of the WEAI. And what I've really loved about the WEAI is how it has adapted over time to be fit for purpose. And this work on streamlining it, at least streamlining the women's empowerment metrics to be suitable for incorporation into national statistical systems is quite exciting, though I am also sure it is quite challenging, but it's really opening up a whole new space to have nationally representative data on women's empowerment that's going to be useful for decision making. So thank you so much, Agnes, for some of those reflections. We will now turn to colleagues in Bangladesh. You heard Agnes mention Bangladesh, to share some experiences from the US government's Feed the Future initiative in Bangladesh. And we will also hear lessons from the Bangladesh Integrated Household Survey, which is the first nationally representative survey to include WEAI, as well as, and we'll also hear from the Agriculture, Nutrition, and Gender Linkages program known as ANGEL. So we are fortunate to have Randy Ali, the Deputy Mission Director for USAID in Bangladesh, Akhtar Ahmed, the IFPRI country representative in Bangladesh, and Muhammad Zahidu Hassan, who's the Managing Director of Data Analysis and Technical Assistance Data, to share more through this video.
Hello, everyone, and greetings from Dhaka. I am honored to join you today to share how we have used the Women's Empowerment and Agriculture Index to achieve incredible progress in empowering women in Bangladesh. In 2011, the United States government launched the Feed the Future initiative to tackle hunger and poverty in 19 target countries, one of which was Bangladesh. With investments of more than $50 million each year, the Feed the Future program in Bangladesh is one of the largest in the world. And Bangladesh was the first to implement the Women's Empowerment and Agriculture Index. In 2012, findings from that survey indicated that only 1 in 3 women were empowered, as defined by the Empowerment Index indicators. Not only that, the gender parity between women and men was low. We found that less than half of women were as empowered as the men in their households. We had a lot of work to do, but this was the first time we had a benchmark to use to measure progress and guide our work. And we have tailored our approach to help women reach their full potential. In addition to training opportunities that help women farmers and producers increase productivity, we also expanded our toolbox to equip women with business skills and provide them with access to credit and finance. This enabled them to invest in themselves and to grow their businesses. And in 2019, 7 years after the survey was conducted, we witnessed remarkable changes. 2 out of every 3 women were empowered, and gender parity significantly increased. The index has been a valuable tool to help us track this progress. We continue to use the index to adapt our approach and provide women with even more opportunities to improve their lives. We look forward to continuing to partner together to provide equitable opportunities for women in agriculture and empower them to unlock their full potential. Thank you.
Solid evidence is very important for including women's empowerment and gender issues in policies. When this WEAI, Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index, was developed in 2012, at that time we also started designing our national Bangladesh Integrated Household Survey. My colleague Agnes said that, Akhtar, how about including this WEAI module in your national survey, because this is the first national representative survey where WEAI could be included. And then when we analyzed the data, we found that women's empowerment improves nutrition for women, for children in the household. We also found that women's empowerment improves agricultural diversity, and women's empowerment helps people move out of poverty. So these are solid examples because we had this Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index. So with that evidence, then we went to the Minister of Agriculture, and then we designed this angel project. So after completing the research, we found some quite useful, interesting findings about this angel program. It improved, nutrition knowledge, and agriculture production practices improved, and farmers' income improved, and empowerment of both men and women improved in various areas. So, encouraged by these results, then the ministry have decided to scale up the angel program nationally. So this is unprecedented in Bangladesh.
I think we are lucky that in Bangladesh all variants of WEAI have been tested and implemented. Finding of WEAI results from Bangladesh Integrated Household Survey used to design another study called Agriculture Nutrition Gender Linkage Project. The findings of that survey is taken by government, implemented by Agriculture Ministry, and they are using the findings from Angel survey and gradually scaling up with the best practices to implement the same thing in hundreds of upazilas. So now we will be looking forward to see the next decade how this WEAI modules index help to shape further researches in coming years.
It's always so amazing to hear from Bangladesh because it really shows both the versatility of the WEAI, but also its utility, that it can be used from projects to large programs to national level, and can actually be used to inform government programs. Now, continuing to learn about the experience in Bangladesh, and we are so privileged to have the Honorable Dr. Shirin Shamin Chaudhry, the MP and Speaker of the Parliament of the Government of the People's Republic of Bangladesh. Honorable Dr. Chaudhry is the first woman speaker of the Bangladesh Parliament. Congratulations, Honorable. She was elected chairperson of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association in 2014 for 3 years. As State Minister for Women and Children Affairs, Dr. Chaudhry promoted gender equality and contributed in formulating National Women Development Policy, Children Policy, and Domestic Violence Prevention and Protection Act. Dr. Chaudhry was awarded Asia Society's Humanitarian Services Award in 2010 for her role in preventing violence against women and mainstreaming women's empowerment in Bangladesh. As a Commonwealth scholar, she earned her PhD degree in constitutional law and human rights from the University of Essex, UK in 2000. We are so grateful that you could be with us today, Dr. Chaudhry. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Warm greetings from Bangladesh. It is a great pleasure and very distinct honor for me to join this event today virtually, Measuring What Matters, 10 years of the Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index. Why has it mattered and what's next? I would like to extend my deep appreciation to the organizers for arranging this important event. It is a great honor to represent the government of Bangladesh on this very special occasion. Women play a critical role in agriculture, food security, and in the broader food system. Women are key to agricultural transformation around the world, but various obstacles and economic constraints limit their contributions to their households and communities. The lack of data and evidence around women's empowerment is a major stumbling block and challenge that holds us back. How can our good intentions translate to evidence-based policymaking that will enable women to empower themselves and achieve their full potential? It was strongly felt that further inclusion of women in agriculture would require an innovative mode to measure what matters and to what extent. This is where including more women made it necessary to assess empowerment of women in different sectors in a more focused way. And thus, the Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index, WEAI, was developed as a valuable tool. The index is a significant innovation in its field and aims to increase understanding of the connections between women's empowerment, food security, and agricultural growth. It measures the roles and extent of women's engagement in the agricultural sector in 5 domains. 1. Decisions about agricultural production. 2. Access to and decision-making power over productive resources. 3. Control over use of income. 4. Leadership in the community. And 5. Time use. It also measures women's empowerment relative to men within their households. Thus, the original WEAI is a survey-based tool that measures inclusion of women in the agricultural sector. It has been designed to look at both sole and joint household decision-making and control over livelihoods, resources, and income, mostly in agriculture and in population-based surveys of both men and women. Since then, WEAI has grown into a suite of qualitative and quantitative tools to meet increasing and novel demands on investigating women's empowerment. I remember when this tool was first launched in an event at the 56th UN Committee on the Status of Women in 2012, I spoke at the panel inaugurating the WEAI, and I was very optimistic about what it could achieve. It was the first of its kind to directly measure women's empowerment in agriculture. Now, after 10 years of using this tool in Bangladesh, I am pleased to share that we have learned so much about the patterns, empowerment, how they have changed over time, and how they are linked with important outcomes in agriculture and nutrition. I am even more pleased that this information has been used to design and implement gender and nutrition sensitive agricultural programs in Bangladesh. The government of Bangladesh's commitment to empowering women predates the WEAI. Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina called for women's productivity to be enhanced by addressing gender-specific challenges, such as prevent violence against women, creating equal opportunities for them in all sectors of life, including agriculture, improving livelihood through gender-responsive policy interventions, social safety net programs, etc. Now, the positive results that we have seen by application of WEAI in Bangladesh. As gender equality is central to our Bangladesh's vision, we are very proud to have played a key role in the development of WEAI. Bangladesh was the first country to implement WEAI as part of a nationally representative household survey, the Bangladesh Integrated Household Survey in 2011 and 2012. From that survey, we found that women's empowerment was linked with greater production diversity and dietary diversity. Motivated by this, the Ministry of Agriculture worked with IFPRI to design and test a pilot project to leverage gender, agriculture, and nutrition. This was the Agriculture, Nutrition, and Gender Linkages project called ANGEL. An important lesson from ANGEL was that providing training in agriculture and nutrition to husbands and wives together had beneficial impacts on production diversity and dietary diversity. The program also empowered women without disempowering men. Based on these results, the government of Bangladesh has decided to scale up the program nationwide. Over the past decade, we have observed remarkable changes in empowerment in Bangladesh using WEAI. Empowerment more than doubled between 2011-2012 and 2018-2019 from 29% to 62% in rural Bangladesh. In parallel, gender parity, the percentage of women who are as empowered as the men in their households, increased from less than half to 70%. Encouragingly, empowerment gains are seen across poor and wealthy. So having the nationally representative data on empowerment to inform programs and policy is crucial, and we have seen the success stories here. I am very glad to have witnessed the launch of WEAI and its application in real-world programs and policy. I congratulate its developers and look forward to the continued use of empowerment matrix to guide government policy, not only in Bangladesh, but also in the rest of the world. Having said these words, I wish you all successful deliberations and discussions in this side event. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chaudhry, and for your leadership in this, because it actually takes the leadership of people like you to move the needle on gender equality. Thank you so much. Now, USAID initiated the development of the WEAI at the start of the Feed the Future initiative, together with other partners. From the first pilot in 2011 to its launch in 2012, the US government has been using the index to track changes in women's empowerment across Feed the Future intervention zones in 19 countries. And today I have the distinct honor to introduce the administrator of the US Agency for International Development, Samantha Power. Administrator Power is the first USAID administrator to be a member of the National Security Council, where she prioritizes development in US responses to a range of economic, humanitarian, and geopolitical issues. Administrator Power has long been a champion of the rights of women and girls around the globe, and we are really grateful for that leadership. We are thrilled to have you with us today to share more about why measuring empowerment is a priority for the US government. Administrator Power, welcome, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Jemima, for that kind introduction and for your lifelong commitment to women's empowerment and gender equality. Congratulations to you on your recent appointment as Chief of Economic Empowerment at UN Women. No pressure, big job though. I'd also like to pay tribute to the government of Bangladesh for adopting the Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index, or WEAI. As we heard, Bangladesh was the first nation to fold the WEAI into its national survey of rural households and agriculture work led by the government of Bangladesh and the Honorable Dr. Sharmeen Chowdhury, the International Food Policy Research Institute, and the leadership and local staff of USAID Bangladesh over the last 10 years. I want to start with a short story from here in the United States, one that shows the impact of measuring data and improving the way we do so. For decades, data collected by the US Department of Agriculture showed that America's farms, were primarily run by men. But in 2017, the survey recorded a 27% increase in women farmers, 27% over 5 years. In that time, USDA had changed the survey to make it more accurate. For years, the survey allowed farms to list only one principal operator, and that operator was often male. And though women could do just as much of the work in the data, that just hadn't counted. You all know the truth. It's the purpose of this panel here today and so much of the work that so many of you are doing outside of Zoom. We show what matters to us by what we measure. That idea was central to the launch of Feed the Future in 2010 and the creation of the WEAI. At the time, the world was signaling that empowering women in agriculture just didn't matter very much. At USAID, we knew that women farmers made up a majority of the world's smallholder farms. We also knew that they struggled to access loans, to inherit land, to make their own decisions about which crops to plant and how to farm. But before the WEAI, we couldn't measure how our work in food security was actually empowering those women. That's because historically, empowerment has been difficult to quantify. So we set out to measure that, which is hard to measure, because women's empowerment matters. Together with the International Food Policy Research Institute and the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative, we designed the WEAI. We identified 5 areas that signified empowerment: production, resources, income leadership, and time. And we asked questions designed to reveal women's agency in each. Across the world, the index has made an enormous difference. In Nigeria, WEAI data helped demonstrate the success of a Feed the Future initiative that gave money directly to women. The WEAI showed that the money gave women more control over their income. They could work more, spend and save more, and buy more food. They could independently purchase farm equipment and household necessities, making them more powerful decision makers in their families and communities. WEAI data also helped Nigeria improve its national cash transfer program. Incorporating elements of the Feed the Future initiative made the national program more effective and less expensive. From Dr. Chowdhury and the USAID Bangladesh team, we heard about Bangladesh's extraordinary success in using the WEAI to address disempowerment among women farmers. That work included giving women access to training and technology, helping them speak up in public, and providing options for childcare during work hours. Bangladesh now tracks women's empowerment and gender equality in other national surveys, modeling for other countries what it means to prioritize women's empowerment in agriculture. But most importantly, the index has made clear that women's empowerment matters. Its data doesn't just help design solutions to combat disempowerment, it forces us to acknowledge that there is a problem in the first place. In the last 10 years, the WEAI has faced its share of criticism, that it's too long, too complicated, too expensive. Integrating the WEAI into the government of Bangladesh's national survey helped us see the index in practice, and to then invest in making it more accurate, more streamlined, and more accessible. We have more work to do, needless to say, but the only way to improve the WEAI is to use it. And that's why we're continuing to make women's empowerment a critical part of our Feed the Future food security initiatives. And that is why we urge all of you to build women's empowerment metrics into your national surveys and other agricultural data collection efforts. Without complete, accurate data, entire groups of people are invisible to us. All too often, they are the ones we most need to see, and all too often, they are women. Together, we can make women's empowerment a top priority and close the gender data gap in agriculture. If we expand the WEAI, streamline it, improve it, if we measure what is hard to measure, we won't just make women visible. We will serve them. We will empower them. We will learn from them. We will prove that they matter. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Administrator Power, for those powerful remarks, for reminding us women matter, for reminding us that the WEAI is one of the tools that we can actually use to make women's work visible and to make sure that we are designing for them, whether policy, whether programs, or data collection. Thank you so much, and for being here with us and for your leadership as well. Your support has been so important from the beginning to the present day, and we hope that it continues. Thank you so much. Now, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has also been learning from these experiences as well. And the foundation has prioritized support to the evolution and scaling of WEAI metrics since 2015. I'm very pleased to welcome my dear friend Enoch Chikava, the director of the Agriculture Development Team at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who's here with us today. Enoch, we welcome your perspective on the importance of scaling the collection of women's empowerment in agriculture data and some of your reflections from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So happy to have you here with us today, Enoch. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Jemima. It's great to see you. And again, congratulations for the new role and new city you are in. So I deeply appreciate the opportunity to contribute to this discussion. And again, I concur with Administrator Samantha Power that what gets measured gets done. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation invests in smallholder farmers because they have such a strong track record of providing an effective pathway out of poverty. I mean, I know this from my own story, but we need to make my story ubiquitous. This should be done at a large scale. But we all know that realizing their potential requires a much stronger focus on women farmers. Our work is greatly benefited from the many insights provided by the WEAI. This index deserves enormous credit for helping the world understand that when we invest in women farmers, you do more than just empower women. You support progress that impacts everyone, families, communities, countries, and the world. But for these investments to be successful, we need to know a lot more about women in agriculture. For example, today we are more or less flying blind when it comes to having the gender insights we need to chart progress on SDG 2. If the goal is to end hunger, we can't do it without understanding the needs of women. After all, they are doing much of the food production in places with the highest concentration of hunger. And we know they face many challenges men don't. The Ceres 2030 project is trying to overcome these challenges by looking for gender-specific data. This partnership has used advances in machine learning and other powerful tools to build a vast database of knowledge on effective interventions for smallholder farmers in low-income countries. But only about 10% of the interventions they reviewed in thousands of research reports looked at gender differences in outcomes. They were able to see, for example, that about 2/3 of livestock keepers in low and medium income countries are female, and that married women are less likely to join farmers' organizations. But the overall lack of insights on women is profound. These are studies that looked at the impact of development work in places where women represent almost 50% of the agricultural workforce, yet only 1 in 10 studies considered impact by gender. The status quo must change. I'm sure we all agree with that. We need to prioritize women as we set targets for development. And to do that, we need more than just a fraction of the data. We need more and better data on the specific barriers and opportunities facing women and men in the agricultural sector. WEAI is one way for us to collect that data and make it useful more broadly. I just want to highlight a few opportunities here. One has been mentioned already by Maximo, which is the 50 by 2030. Maybe just go to a specific example in Uganda, in the annual survey of the farming households. The survey now reports on the percentage of farming households that are led by women in different regions of the country. It also reports on disparities in education and literacy and access to land. And the differences are significant. This data can inform targeted interventions. But we need to be going further. We need to regularly measure differences in areas like access to irrigation, fertilizers, and finance, and extension services. Then we need to dig even deeper into underlying issues like household decisions about saving and spending and division of labor for domestic work versus leisure time, to understand why women farmers face challenges that men don't. WEAI allows us to do this. The CARDEP process presents another opportunity to sharpen our focus on women in agriculture. CARDEP is guiding agriculture investments and policies across sub-Saharan Africa. And it's good to see that it's now taking steps to highlight the importance of women's empowerment to accomplishing its goals. That includes the recognition that, in general, all CARDEP countries lack sufficient data on women in agriculture. I mean, this is progress. Last year, a UN analysis of agriculture investment plans in 7 CARDEP countries found the lack of data makes it difficult to determine whether women farmers are benefiting from new investments in areas like agricultural inputs. It could be that failure to reach the women farmers is holding up progress in several areas across the agricultural sector. But we can only know that when we collect the data. The fundamental argument for better data on women is simple. In many low-income countries, they account for 40 to 50% of smallholder farmers. Think about how long a company can last if they fail to take care of more than 50% of their customer base. That company will go under for sure. Fortunately, WEAI has provided a powerful framework. It clearly identifies the specific obstacles women face, and it allows us how to track gender equality and measure true empowerment. It has been helpful for me to reflect on this, but we know the bigger work is just starting now. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Enoch, for sharing on behalf of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And it's very refreshing to hear your strong commitment to ensuring women's empowerment data in the agriculture sector is systematically collected and that it is used across the globe. And we believe you are in a really good position as one of the big supporters of that sector to influence this. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, this is a great transition to our exciting panel. Our esteemed panelists will share important lessons and distinct perspectives from their own work and their use of WEAI-based metrics. We will have the opportunity to hear from Lizzie Chikoti, the Acting Commissioner of the National Statistical Office of Malawi, Paulina Andy, the Director of Women in Agriculture Development in the Ministry of Food and Agriculture for Ghana, John Ulimwengu, who's a Senior Research Fellow from IFPRI, who will speak on the KERDEP experience, Pranati Mohanraj, the Deputy Director for Gender, Youth and Livelihoods in Food and Water Systems at KIUSA. And finally, Arthur Mabiso, a Senior Technical Specialist at the International Fund for Agriculture Development, IFAD. We are grateful to the panelists for joining today. I'm going to start with a question to you, Lizzie. What role do you see for country-owned survey programs or national agriculture and rural household survey programs to better track gender equity, equality, and women's empowerment for the SDGs? And even more importantly, how can we then use that data to inform the design and the implementation of national agriculture and food system policies and programs? So what's your experience from Malawi? Over to you, Lizzie.
Thank you, Jemima. Good morning, good afternoon. As regards country-owned survey programs, these will ensure that specific issues in a country are addressed. I know that in most cases, we do use, like for data collection tools, would use internationally, designed questionnaires, and then these would be adopted to our own country-specific needs. So, for example, for Malawi, apart from ensuring that survey indicators are aligned with SDGs and targets, specifically or especially SDG 5, and then SDG 2, which talks about hunger, we'll make sure that the country, the indicators are also in line with the Malawi 2063 agenda, as well as the Malawi implementation plan, the MIP1. In which case, when we do this, we know that the country-specific needs will be addressed in these country-owned survey programs. Secondly, in Malawi, women are key actors in food systems as producers, wage workers, processors, traders, as well as consumers. So it's important that in making national agriculture and food system policies and programs, this has to be taken into account. They have to consider the available data on women empowerment. We know that data on women empowerment and gender equity and equality can be used to assist in evidence-based decision-making, as well as for proper policy reforms, just to mention a few. I would like to share with you a specific example for Malawi, where use of disaggregated data has been taken up by the Ministry of Gender in introducing the End Child Marriage program. The ministry initiated intervention to address issues of child marriage and teen pregnancies. And the ministry used the 2015-2016 demographic and health survey to determine the number of boys and girls below the age of 18. And from this, the program target was removing children from marriages and provide an opportunity to empower girls to go back to school. So in this case, you can see that the data that is produced by the statistical office is used in programs and policies to help the country, to improve what is on the ground. And thirdly, the programs will also ensure timely production of data from surveys and integrating with administrative data sources that will ensure continuous provision of data. Malawi NSO has vast experience in collecting individual level data in the national surveys that are conducted by the office. And we have participated in several methodological experiments, like the individual level data collection in the integrated household panel survey of 2016. The need for more gender disaggregated data is extensive, and the NSO plans to embed such data in more national surveys that we'll be conducting in future.
Thank you.
In terms of WEMS, the NSO in collaboration with the World Bank and IFPRI have engaged in conducting WEMS. And in terms of experience, NSO last year, jointly with IFPRI, conducted cognitive interviews to test the questions, in the questionnaire. And after this, the NSO went ahead to do data collection for the first wave of WEMS in September 2021. And during this wave, we covered a total of 1,834 households or respondents.
Yes, thank you, Lizzie. What I'm going to do is I'm going to circle to the other panelists, and then I'll come back to you for some reflections on what that experience has been about the WEMS and how you are taking that forward. But let me quickly go to our next panelist. Who is Paulina Adi, the Director of Women in Agricultural Development in the Ministry of Food of Ghana, Food and Agriculture for Ghana, to basically ask the same question from a Ministry of Agriculture perspective. First, what ways you can use this data on women's empowerment to support the design and implementation of policies. But I would also like you to reflect on something that your president said during his speech at the UN Food Systems Summit, where I was privileged to lead the work on gender. And in his speech, he set a target to increase the Women's Empowerment in Agriculture Index by 20%. and to really ask you to reflect on what prompted the government to set this goal and what change does the country hope to catalyze by setting this ambitious goal. Over to you, Paulina, in about 3 minutes. I know it's a tough ask.
Thank you very much. I would deliver. And thanks for the opportunity to be part of this panel. But we need to redefine the first element, the production. We need to expand it to include the post-production segments of the value chain. And that is where we find the women. We limit to production and most of the things skew towards men. And we just limit it to agricultural production. And lots of things fall through the cracks. The post-production segments, the volumes that are churned, and so on, we don't capture these in our statistics, and that is very worrying. I have assumed a very strategic position being a co-convener for the UN Food Systems Summit Dialogue, and we did craft the commitment statements as well as the pathways, which we had to discuss and then firm up for it to get to the president. So once we have documented this, we would have to follow the process to see to the implementation. Having said that, for our statistics, yes, when you look through, we look at agricultural production, major crops, but the women's crops are not being captured. And these are all things we are picking for us to see how women's contribution can even change how we calculate our gross domestic product. And of course, how women do contribute to these. For Ghana, we have come a long way with empowerment of women. And without the metrics, you really cannot talk about the contributions that women make. And I would want to commend IFPRI for spearheading the implementation of the WEAI. But as I have said earlier, the production aspect has to be expanded to include what the women do. I think I can throw more light on this because the time given is just too short to push all these things in there. But in the ministry, talking about production makes provisioning for tractors, and then we leave out the processing equipment, which will go to transform agricultural produce to stabilize diversified forms to make food available all year round. And I think if we deal with that part, we'll be good to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Pauline. And what I like is also your suggestions from someone who's sitting at the ministry in terms of what are some of the other improvements that you would like to see in the WEAI, but also really proud of Ghana's commitment to not just measure women's empowerment, but to also make sure that they are increasing and improving the empowerment of women in the sector. Now I'm going to turn quickly to John Ulimwengu, a Senior Research Fellow at IFPRI. We have heard from Ghana, we have heard from Malawi. You are sitting looking at the continental view. Now, CADEP's biannual reporting framework includes an indicator on the proportion of rural women that are empowered in agriculture. What capacity building efforts have you identified or implemented to support national statistical offices in reporting on this empowerment indicator, and what further support do you see as needed? But even more importantly, how do we then translate that data into the policy making process?
Thank you, Jemima, and thank you for the organizer for the invitation. I think from the state, for those who are not familiar with the CADEP, CADEP stands for Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program. It's a continental wide vision for agriculture development. So from the start, I think the head of state understood that the road to agricultural transformation goes through women empowerment because more than 60% of those are feeding Africa are women. And that's the reason why they, in the mutual accountability framework that they set forth, they adopted WEAI as the metric to report on the progress. And of course, CADEP itself is a platform with multiple stakeholders, those dealing with statistics, those on the policy, on investment, private sector government officials. As far as the statistical component is concerned, the type of capacity is first to understand what is where. I think I had, thanks to Agnes and her team, we were able to do some of that across the continent, just to make sure that those collecting information including the needs to report on women empowerment. I'm proud to report that from the report that was released 2 weeks ago, the CADEP BR report, 31 African countries out of 55 have reported on WEAI or WEAI-like index, which is a big improvement. And why it is, as far as CADEP is concerned, we don't look at WEAI just as an index. It is part of the mainstream policy making in agriculture development across the continent. You mentioned the 20% that the president of Ghana mentioned in his speech. It's not only for Ghana, the 20% is for the whole continent. That's the target by 2025 to increase women empowerment to that level. So that's how important it is. But there are still, of course, challenges. 31 countries out of 55, it's not enough. So we need to continue to support statistical systems to embed, to have WEAI or WEAI-like indicators as part of the system, so that we can report. And how a report on WEAI is impacting policies. Again, the CADEP agenda is not only about reporting on indicators, but it's also part of the policy improvement through the joint sector reviews in each country. So every time the report is released, there is an analysis at country level, and that analysis goes into the joint sector review to revise policies for the next cycle. So that's how important it is to report on WEAI and disaggregated, gender disaggregated information.
Thank you. Thank you very much, John, and for at least highlighting some of those reporting mechanisms and accountability mechanisms that you have for women's empowerment through CADEP. I'm now going to turn to Pranati Mohanraj and to talk about things on the ground. And given CARE's experience in the field, can you please share with us how you see empowerment metrics like WEAI improving development outcomes and advancing gender equity, equality, and women's empowerment in agriculture and food systems projects at community level? Pranati, over to you.
Thanks, Jemima, and hello, everyone. Yeah, happy to share CARE's experience on using WEAI. So CARE's collective vision for 2030 furthers our commitment to gender equality, to social justice, and empowerment. CARE, puts gender equality at the heart of all that we do, including equal voice and leadership and ending gender-based violence. What I was mentioning is, so as an organization, CARE promotes, women's empowerment by supporting women and girls, their own effort to take control of their lives and to fulfill their rights, their responsibilities, and aspirations. So CARE's food, water, and livelihoods programming aims at supporting women small-scale producers and farmers from the most vulnerable and excluded communities to realize their rights to food, water, and nutrition security. We are promoting women's empowerment and aspiring for a gender equitable agriculture system and inclusive markets. So for measuring our achievements against these set targets, set goals, and for gathering evidence and learning, it's really important for us to track the extent to which we have impacts. And that's where WEAI comes in. We used and are still using WEAI in its different versions, including Pro-WEAI in most of our agriculture and livelihood projects, helping us to tell the impact story at the global level and the contribution that CARE is making for empowering women and achieving gender equality. We have evidence from our projects that indicate women are more empowered at the end of the project. For example, in one of our projects, the number of women who met CARE's definition of empowered on the WEAI metrics more than doubled in Ghana and Tanzania. And women's empowerment scores increased an average of 14 points for Mali and Tanzania. And 6 points for India, Ghana, and Malawi, which was really exciting to notice. Secondly, more women are making decisions. Women's ability to influence household decisions went up in the same project by about 25 percentage points, with the highest impact in Mali, a 37 percentage point change. The third thing I would like to mention is, our WEAI data indicate that more women are becoming leaders. For example, women in leadership positions increased from 20% at the baseline to 60% at the end of the project. Of course, there was country variations, but in every country that the project was implemented, at least 23% more women felt confident in their lives and in speaking out. And in Mali, the number was an 86% increase. Also, we have evidence of increased women's access to decisions on finance and credit. So women now not just have better access to finance or credit, but also taking decisions on how to use that, how to use the loan that they are availing. So WEAI has helped us to measure the changes that are happening and the achievements that we are having. At the same time, the data generated, helping us understanding the gaps and where we need improvement. So this is both about, proving to the world and being accountable to others that we actually make an important contribution towards women's empowerment and gender equality, as well as about, improving our own work and about learning. Thank you. I'll give it back to you, Jemima. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Pranati. And of course, I forgot to say it's great to see you and hear from you again. I'm going to go now to our last panelist, Ada Mabiso. Now, IFAD is in a unique position as both an implementing organization that has used the WEAI-based metrics, and you're also a core member of the 50 by 2030 initiative, focusing on data use. So I have a two-part question for you. First is how IFAD itself uses the WEAI metrics within its own measurement and learning. But second is how some of the findings of the 50 by 2030 data use ecosystem mapping exercise that would be, what are some of these findings that would be useful and relevant to consider in promoting the use of data on women's empowerment and gender equality? I know it's a two-part question, but I hope you can at least give us some insight in about 3 minutes. Thank you, Ada.
Thank you so much, Jemima. A great pleasure to be here. Well, maybe first, your first part of the question, just to say, we've been using WEAI-based metrics for quite some time at IFAD for our monitoring and evaluation of the projects that we invest in rural development, starting with earlier work on the Pro-WEAI, which were incorporated in our questionnaires to our project M&E systems. More recently, we have been using WEAI-based metrics in our impact assessments, particularly incorporating the IWEA, which was referred to earlier on. And here we're using it mostly to measure women's empowerment for beneficiaries in our projects compared to what we call the control or comparison groups to see what is the impact of our investments in women's empowerment, but also assessing gender equality in some of the projects. And actually, thanks to IFPRI and the support that we received working closely with the team, we have actually collected data in 6 countries in Africa recently where the IWEA metric has been incorporated. And this has enabled us to learn a lot of new insights, areas where we hadn't been collecting information on. For example, in Kenya and Tanzania, we found that women who benefited from the IFAD projects actually had an increase in their empowerment, ranging from 5 to 10%. So obviously not huge increases, but we do see increases that are significant compared to those who are not part of the IFAD projects. However, we also noticed that there is still a lot of improvements needed, particularly on gender parity. So we don't see a lot of impacts with respect to gender parity. And I think this is highlighting the importance of measuring women's empowerment, but also gender equality. Now, in terms of our efforts with under the 50 by 2030 initiative, as you might know, our data use ecosystems mapping is still in its beginning. So we are just starting to learn from this work. What we find, at least from the work in Cambodia, is in fact that policymakers are not demanding data that is focusing on women's empowerment or even gender equality. So we need to make an effort to make policymakers aware of this, sensitizing them, and then hopefully we will see an increase. Of course, part of it has to do with also building capacities to and increasing the expertise that's available, because that's also proving to be a constraint. So overall, I think a lot of work that still lies ahead for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arthur, and especially for highlighting the demand side of this, how we actually create the demand through sensitization for this kind of data so that it actually then feeds into policy and programming at national level. So thank you for those reflections. Now, I'm going to come to a very quick Q&A. It's been a very rich discussion, so we've sort of almost run out of our Q&A time, but I do want to acknowledge the team from behind the scenes that has been responding to a lot of the questions that are coming up in the Q&A, and I would like everybody to be on screen now. Turn on your cameras, all the panelists and speakers, so that I can direct a couple of questions that still remain to you. Now, I would like you to take just a minute to answer these questions so that we are able to close on time. Now, I have a very specific question for Agnes Kisumbing. I'm going to ask all of them so that you go one after the other in the answering part of this. Agnes, a very specific questions for you on how to use this, how to use the WEAI in programs on women-led approaches to climate resilient food systems. So a very specific question for you, Agnes. Now for Paulina, for Lizzie and John, there's a question around what is the biggest challenge you've encountered integrating the WEAI into the data collection tools, whether it's national surveys or within the CADEP process, and for Pranati, some of the adaptations, at least one adaptation that you've made to the WEAI. So I'll ask Agnes to go first, each in a minute, please.
Sure, thank you, Jemima. So WEAI is a measure of agency and ability to respond, and this includes responding to things like climate change. So if I were designing a women-led resilient food system, I would use the WEAI to track how empowerment is being affected by climate shocks. At the same time, I would track things that make women more empowered and which also make them better able to respond to climate change. So some of this, for example, includes having the ability to decide or make decisions on assets, because assets are very key to coping with climate change, and people with women who have stronger property rights are better able to adopt climate smart agricultural practices. So empowerment is both an effect of climate change, but it can also help women to become more resilient to it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Agnes. Now, Paulina, one key challenge that you have faced with the WEAI, or that you see as a challenge.
Yeah, thank you very much. The key challenge is picking up the operations at the small and micro scale level to run with the major production cycles. We always see the major production cycles being picked, but I think strongly that we need to match it with those at the micro and small scale, because they are in their numbers and they will contribute immensely. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paulina. And Lizzie, the same question. You've already started testing women's. What is the key challenge that you see? And what do we do about it?
Okay, thank you. The key challenge that we are facing in conducting WEMs is that because we're using phones, you know, to do the interviews. So the challenge that we are facing is reaching households through these phones, because we find that some of the numbers no longer exist. And therefore this is leading to high attrition of respondents. Thank you.
Thank you so much. In these times of COVID, how do we actually reach the hard to reach with this, so that we know that we are not leaving anyone behind? And John, key challenge rallying African governments around this measure of women's empowerment, and what you're doing about that.
I think it's the first, the regularity. It's difficult for the countries to implement the WEAI type of survey every year. So that's, you know, referred to the funding as well. But on technical, so on the technical side, I think again Agnes and her team has been helping very well. And now another thing, as far as CADEP is concerned, is the extension of WEAI to the other component of the value chain. We would like to capture this empowerment not only at the production stage, but also through the processing, distribution, and how women can be empowered throughout the whole value chain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. And for Pranati, you made some adaptations to the WEAI. Please share just one adaptation and why you made it.
Yes, we did. Yeah, happy to share that. We actually included mobility to the time and autonomy domain. And why we added mobility is, and the particular index we added was achieving a mobility score. So we were working on this food security and agriculture sector. And we know that when we were working with the women small scale producers and farmers, mobility is one of the key concerns within Africa as well, but relatively more within the South Asian context. So that's the reason we added mobility. And also we added the other aspect, which is expressing attitude that supports gender equitable roles in family life. So these are the two additions we made without compromising the overall weightage of the WEAI. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pranati. Seeing the need to actually adapt this to context. And now a question for you. You've been one of the most creative adopters of the WEAI. I'm sure many in the audience are wondering, is this a tool that they can use to measure women's empowerment? What would you tell them?
No, thank you. I think definitely this is a very useful tool for us. And what I would say is innovation. I really have enjoyed and appreciated the effort from the IFPRI team, how we can integrate it into our survey, our existing survey, and really testing it, piloting it, and adapting it so that it really works. Particularly saving time in the interviews. because one of the things that we've really benefited from is that we've been able to capture that important data without spending too much time for the respondents. So we really thank and appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ada. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but what an exceptional, amazing event to celebrate WEAI's 10th birthday. Many, many thanks to our amazing speakers. It really is inspiring to see so many diverse partners, including governments, taking the lead in collecting and using data on women's empowerment, and actually using that data to then inform policies and programming. So there's opportunity to reflect on 10 years of WEAI's impact on measuring and tracking empowerment has been invaluable. We've had many perspectives that have identified policy relevant and actionable insights that countries and partners alike can take away to advance the vision for WEAI over the next 10 years. So these next 10 years will be important to scaling up empowerment metrics and their use by development practitioners worldwide. We know the BMGF, for example, through the gender platform and the CGIAR is helping to scale these out. We hope that you valued this discussion about this ambitious work that partners are undertaking to improve use and scale empowerment metrics so that agriculture transformation can be truly inclusive. Because as someone said, what gets measured gets done. And I do hope that the conversation at the CSW in 2032 can actually engage across all countries, because the WEAI, and especially women's, we will have reached each and every country around the world. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.